Okay, yesterday um, we talked about the remainder and theorem and some factoring. So remember, remainder, if I just plug in a number, remember if you just plug it into the equation, that will just give you the remainder. If you do synthetic division, it'll kind of give you the answer when you divide and the remainder. Okay, so the last part of that assignment was find the binomial factors. So basically, you're kind of undoing distributive property stuff. So you started off with 3 binomials, you multiplied them all out, and you got that answer. Now I'm kind of having you work backwards. But everything that we've done thus far isn't working for it. You can't factor it, you can't use quadratic formula, can't do greatest common factor. There's a lot of things you can't do. So yesterday I gave you, hey, try these numbers like plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, 0. Find me a 0. And then it was do synthetic division and then factor your answer, and voila, there were your 3. Okay, well, today's is, well, what if that list plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, or 0 doesn't work? Okay, so, sorry, I have a candy. All right, so what if those numbers don't work? If you try all those numbers and none of them give you a 0? Well, here's a way you can generate a list. Okay, so how do I know those numbers are going to work all the time? Well, you don't. But these right here are the numbers that will work. Once you generate this list, you try any of those numbers. It's on the list. So if 2 isn't on your list, don't try 2 because 2 won't work. So how do we get this list of potential zeros? Well, you're going to make 2 lists of numbers and then make some fractions here. So it says P over Q. So P, that's the numerator. These are all the things that multiply and give me that constant. Remember, the constant is the number on the end that doesn't have any variable. The denominator of this list of things are the factors of the leading coefficient. So all the things that multiply and give me that number in front of your highest degree. And then once you make that little list, then you do P over Q. And then that is the list where you would try numbers. Okay? So we're going to look at this one, where it just says list the possible roots. Now remember, when I give you stuff like this, these are the directions in which I would ask on a test. Okay, so let's get out of there. Let's go here. Stop there. And here's that example. So it said list the possible roots. So now, like I said, maybe plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, and 0 don't work. So you're going to kind of make a list here of these numbers. And then this right here is going to be your list. Okay? So P, I'm just going to kind of put one line, are all the things that multiply and give me, whoops, that. So that's how I do here. So all the things that multiply and give me 8 are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8. The reason why the plus or minus, because a negative times a negative is a positive, so I don't really know. Okay? Q. That's your leading coefficient. Remember, it's the number that's in front of your degree, your highest power. So all the things that multiply and give me 3 are 1 and 3. So now where I have starred, that's where I'm going to put my list of P over Q. So if I do 1 over 1, 2 over 1, 4 over 1, 8 over 1, Now, if I do 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 4 over 3, 8 over 3. Okay, and where I have starred, that is my list. So now those are the only numbers you would try when I say, hey, find me a 0, find me one that works. It would be on this list. I'm not saying all of these things work, obviously, because the degree is 3. So that means at most 3 of them work. But this would be the numbers you would try. Now, if it were me, I would try whole numbers first. But that's the list. So if it's not on the list, don't try it. Don't plug 3 into there. It will not give you a 0. It is not on this list. Okay? So that kind of narrows the list down. The day before I said, hey, try these. But now this narrows it down a little bit. Okay? The next thing on here, it's going to look like a lot, but it's actually easier than what you think. Okay, so we generated the list there. Now, this looks like a lot, but once we do this, all you're really doing is counting. Now, if you can count, some of you may struggle with this. You know who you are. Math. But if you can count, you're good to go here. So this little rule here with this rule of signs can narrow down your list a little bit more. It can tell me how many positive or how many negative zeros I'll have. Okay? So all you're going to do to find how many positive ones, so greater than 0, positive ones, is just count the sign changes. If it goes from a positive to a negative or a negative to a positive, you count that as a change. And then you just count till you get to the end. And then it always goes down by 2. So if you count 5 changes, you could have 5, you could have 3, you could have 1. Okay, if you count 4 changes, you could have 4, you could have 2, or you could have 0. That's what it means by terms by this number less than 2. All right, so the negative zeros is basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my original equation and I'm going to plug in negative x. Now all that's going to do is change the sign in front of the odd powers. And then I'm going to count again. So if it goes from a positive to negative, negative to positive, I'm going to count and then I'm going to subtract 2 until I get to 0 or 1. And at the bottom, I kind of gave an example of if you count 5 changes, if you count 4 changes. Okay, that's a lot going on that slide. So we're going to just find the positive. I'm writing it down as I'm talking. Minus 1 minus 8x plus 3. So one of these things is if I go through and count changes and I'm on this one, the positive one, and I count no changes, well then don't try any positive numbers. Okay? Maybe I count the negative changes and I only have 1 negative. Well, once I find that number, don't try any more negative numbers. Okay, so we're going to get out of there. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go right here. Okay, now we're just counting how many positive changes we can have. So you start here. Positive, positive, didn't change. Positive to a negative, there's 1. Negative to a positive, there's 2. Positive to a negative, there's 3. Negative to a positive, there's 4. So I could have 4 or 2 or 0. Okay, now to find out how many negative I'll have, basically what I'm doing is putting a negative x in here, but it's only going to change the odd powers. Okay, the reason why it only changes the odd ones, because remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. So if I have an equal amount, that means there's an equal amount to cross out, but on our negatives. But on this one right here, I have one more negative when you have an odd. So negative to a positive, there's one. Positive, 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 positive. Okay, so, whoops. On this one, that's how you find. So if I was looking for zeros with this, I'd probably go to my list and try the negative numbers because one of them works. One of them definitely works. And then once you find it, there's no other negatives out there. So don't try any more negative numbers. But that's what I would do. Now, why does it go down by 2? Okay, so this is to the 5th. So my degree is to the 5th. So that means it's going to be a end like a disco. All right. So you could have one negative and 1, 2, 3. So there's my one negative, 1, 2, 3, 4 positive. My graph can look like this. My graph could look like this. There's my one negative, and then there's 2 positive. Because once you take one of these out, you take them both out. Because remember, imaginary stuff goes in pairs. Or my graph could look like this. So there's my one negative and my 0 positive. So that's why you kind of go down by 2s, because there's the 3 scenarios of what my graph could look like. Okay, you'll know more once you find the zeros, because I can speak. Okay, so what you're going to do, oh, we did that one. Let's take so long. Okay, so your assignment is on this slide. I will make sure I put what slide that it is on in the homework stuff. So what you're going to do is you're going to do these 4 problems. So the first thing you're going to do is make your list, your P over Q. You're going to make a list for them. The second thing you're going to do is the counting signs. So find the possible positive and negative zeros. And then the last thing is what you're going to do yesterday. You are going to find the zeros. So when you get to that part, look at your list that you created, find one that works, synthetic division, and then factor it. Okay? So that's all I have today. Remember, you have a quiz tomorrow over the beginning stuff. So, peace.